Welcome to our Ask Me Anything session.
Hello, how are you guys?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you. I think coping.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
as we all are.
We are all there in solidarity. So you actually have many of the OTM team members on board. So I'll just give you a quick rundown and then we'd love to hear any of your questions. But my name is Reagan. I'm the marketing manager and I kind of host these and make sure they run smoothly, but all of our wonderful expert consultants are on the phone as well. So Thomas, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi Priya. My name is Thomas Döring. I'm the German on the call here. I work for On the Mark. Previously, I've worked for Procter & Gamble. Yeah, looking forward to our conversation. Peter?
Amazing.
Hi, thanks, Thomas. I'm Peter Turgis. I'm based in the UK. Been with OTM for over 10 years now, and prior to that, a career in HR. Done lots of redesign projects, both with OTM and prior to that. And again, looking forward to hearing, and trying to answer any questions that people have got for us. Mark?
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Thomas. Hi, Priya. First question for you, Priya. Where are you calling from?
UK, London.
Ah, great. And I'm assuming you're on lockdown as well, right? Probably at home?
Yes, I think we are all in solidarity. So I think we're kind of on.
Yeah, Peter
If
was
it's
just
week 2 or
saying.
week 1.
Yeah.
Exactly. Peter was just saying he volunteered, he did the call for the NHS volunteers, which you probably are aware of.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah,
well,
so
there's 500,000 of us did it.
yeah, and not all from Devon either.
No, that's true. Yeah, I think I'm probably better off in Devon than I am in London, but there we go.
And Priya, I'm sitting in Phoenix, Arizona, seconded in my flat, yeah, so it's like Peter, we've been doing this work a long time. Combined across On the Mark, we've done about 450 redesigns, and we're here to answer your questions. So that we don't have any structured or prepared responses, because the ask us anything or ask me anything is really just about answering your design questions. So we've got Bernard on the call. Hi, Bernard. It's good to see you online. Nice picture.
Thank you.
Bernard, we're going to just jump into it. We have members from the On the Mark team here, as well as Priya calling in from London. So let's open it up, Priya. Since you're on first, we'll be chivalrous. Let you ask any question that you want to start with.
Oh, wow, you're putting me on the spot. I'd actually like to get some perspective. Obviously, we've been working with a couple of different clients prior to the current crisis, but having worked with a number of clients, obviously a lot are deciding to, from a media perspective, obviously take their planning and buying in-house. And we're seeing a lot of these kind of conversations starting to grow. I guess one kind of question just to kind of kick off with, in that regard, how have you dealt with clients that are very keen on moving in one direction? However, when you are working with them, it doesn't seem to be the best recommendation.
Boy, Peter has a great story about this, and Peter, we're probably channeling each other. But it's a really good question, Priya. And I would start this by saying it depends on the change agent role that you're playing with them. So for example, if you have influence and you have no control, in other words, it's not your decision to make, that is our first assumption. If you're in that kind of role where you can influence, but that's it, it's not your decision to make, then the next question I would ask is, are you wearing a change agent hat of what we call a doctor-patient, a traditional doctor-patient relationship, an expert, and or a process consultant? And all those three roles actually set up a very different set of actions. And I'm going to lay out the kind of I think how we do it, and then I'll let Peter give his practical example that he shared many times. But typically, we're in a process consultation with obviously deep expertise in org design. But for us, the wisdom here is anything you can tell, you can ask. So for you, what we typically do is we try to ask the right questions and get the customer and the customer group involved in making that decision to reconcile those dilemmas and those trade-offs. So by asking those questions, it points people in a specific direction, and we can be quite persistent about the questions we ask. Let me be quiet there and pass it off to Peter. Maybe Peter, you want to share the story.
I think we're both thinking of the same story, and in some ways, Mark's preempted what I was going to say, because we would always operate in a process consultation role. So we're not, I can't think of a better way of phrasing this. We're not arrogant enough to believe that we know more about somebody's business than they do. So people in the business know how that business operates and how that business works. However, there are occasions when they get, the leadership team or the team that's thinking through the design options can get tangled up in the weeds because they have been in the business too long. So the example, I hope this is the example you were thinking of, Mark, but it was a project I was working on where we were doing a very major redesign of an organization which had acquired another organization, and they were merging the two together. And the issue they were struggling with as they were thinking about their way forward and their design was whether the focus and the customer proposition was that they were a product organization like Apple, or they were a customer organization, so they or a customer intimate organization, so they knew as much about the customers or more about the customers than the customers knew themselves. And cutting a long story short, because they were very, very proud of their product, they were the product that they sold. They were getting, they wanted to go down a route of designing what we would think of as an organization that has a gravitational pull around its products, which means that the power in the organization, the key decision making in the organization, rests with the product lines. However, what I could see from the outside in, because I wasn't in the mud, was actually they had no control over their products because they were buying the product in from a supplier, and then they were packaging it and putting it out to customers. So although they were proud of the product, they had no control over it. So I had to spend a lot of time with them, asking the right questions to help them understand that putting all the power in the product lines was actually not the best way forward for their future design. And cutting a long story short, it led them to realizing that actually their unique proposition was around knowing more about their customers than their customers did. But it was what I couldn't do as the process consultant was tell them they were wrong. All I could do was help them think through the consequences of the impact on their organization design and the impact on where power lay and where P&L lay if they went down a product route. So it is all about asking the right questions and helping them come to the right conclusion. Was that the story you were thinking of, Mark?
That's exactly the story. And now the difference there, one of the things I would, Priya, is that the difference in that role for Peter is he had credibility with the customer, and they had, and sometimes, I hate to say this, but I'll say it anyway, as an internal, you have less credibility to stop the group and have them listen to what it is that you're asking. And sometimes that's a bit of a dilemma. So part of the challenge is looking at what credibility you have to stop the conversation and have them take time, energy, and effort to answer your questions versus just like nobody's paying attention to you. And I'm not saying that that's in fact the case, but you have to weigh that into the dynamics. Does that kind of help you a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the kind of thought process around doctor and then the kind of process element is definitely something to be a little bit more cognizant about when having those conversations. Because as you say, ultimately, we don't have the control in terms of forcing them down a route, but ultimately, you want to make sure that they are going to do the best possible outcome. Again, we don't know everything about their company, but from what we can see from an external party, you know, obviously sometimes those can be challenging conversations. So
Well, you're correct, Freya. And just remember, as a vendor partner, once you step over the line into making a decision for that customer, or even implying that they should make a decision, that decision becomes yours, not theirs. And if it goes south, you're going to get blamed for it. And so that's the responsibility you have to, the line you have to walk always as an external vendor.
perfect.
I'm going to move on. My guess is the 651 number is UCLE. Is that is that a pretty good guess? And then welcome, Julie. Good to see you on the call. Julie, is that you?
Hi, this is Julie Hendrickson.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. All right, other questions? Again, this is a pretty open forum. We're prepared to talk about anything org design or strategy related.
Bernard,
It's
do you have
open.
any questions? Oh, sorry, go for it.
I definitely do. I got asked just the other day. Well, so one, I guess I work at PepsiCo and I'm on a org design COE. And I think we're getting a lot of questions around like, how are we measuring our work and how are we defining like our org design to be beneficial and adding value to the organization. So if there's any metrics or thoughts or ideas around like how I could respond to such a question, because this is hard work to quantify. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah, it's not that hard, Julie. Let me touch that one, and then we'll work from there. And hopefully, Peter or Thomas have something to add. I'm sure they do. The first is in early on in doing design work, in a phase that we call the foundation phase, where the business requirements, parameters and constraints are established for the future operating model. One of the big decisions is, how will we know we've been successful in this new operating model? So one of the things that you have, and it sounds by the way you asked the question, Julie, it sounds like you're in the expert role because they want you to tell them. And so one of the things I would share with you is you need to be really careful about, even though you're in an internal COE called org design, you need to be really careful that the customer is not putting the responsibility for you to be magical and pull up all this stuff. But I'll give you some tidbits. You know, when we talk about measures, there's two types of measure. If you think about it by 2 by 2, there's process and impact. And process measures are, did we do what we said we're going to do? And impact measures have to do with, did we make any difference? And then you have the other axis on a 2 by 2, which is around lagging and leading indicators. And of course, I think those things are pretty obvious. Lagging being things that are after the fact and tell you something looking backwards, and leading is proactively anticipating or seeing the impact coming at you. And so keeping that in mind, one of the things that, some of the things that we measure, and then I'll be quiet here, are things like capacity release. For example, one of the things in redesign is we find between 10 to 25% of the current operating costs can be saved through what we call capacity release by redesigning the company. And we find that pretty consistently. And when we talk about the term capacity release, what it means is old work, redundant duplicate work is stopped, errors are fixed, coordination and glue activities are reduced, and how the unit or the leaders choose to want to spend that capacity release is completely up to them. So for example, they could downsize and cut heads, but typically in a redesign process, you're adding new work as well. So we strongly suggest not cutting unless it's after the design, and we've done that, but there's some pitfalls with that. Peter, I'm gonna be quiet here and let you add some metrics, and I've got more, but I'll let you add a few.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think, and I don't want to over confuse this, because I think there's Mark's 2x2 process and outcome and process, leading and lagging. I think it depends whether you're talking about measures around redesign or measures as a result of the redesign, and you need to separate those two. So in the process that we use in OTM, after we've done the current state review, the next phase we do is foundation work, which is about setting the parameters of the organization for the future. And at that point, when you're thinking about the future, that will tell you the thing, or you and the leadership team, or you and the design team should be starting to get a pretty good feel of what you expect to change in the design as a result of the design work that you do. So at that point, that is the point at which you need to set the metrics which will tell you whether your design has been successful or not. And in our experience, generally, the baseline of those metrics doesn't always exist. So if one of the things that you want to do as a result of the redesign is do something about cycle times, it's important that you've got a baseline for those cycle times. So it's important that you've got a baseline in place before you start the design work. And then you can start to track through a set of leading indicators whether the design is taking you in the right direction. So that's one set of metrics. And the other, I think it's important, it's always important to keep these two separate. The other set of metrics then is, as you're doing the foundation work, you will make some decisions on how you expect the business to be performing in the future. And those become the KPIs for the future organization. So the dashboard indicators that the leadership team will use to track the performance of the organization forward. So at the foundation stage of any piece of redesign work, there are two sets of metrics that you need to put in place. One are, and I'm repeating myself now, but deliberately, one are the metrics that will tell you whether your redesign has been successful, i.e., has the redesign made the changes to the operating model that we expected. And the other set of metrics that you need to put in place at the foundation phase, so that you've got a baseline, is what are the KPIs that we will be using to measure the success of our operating model going forwards. I'm not sure if that helped.
The other thing I'll say is I use the Kirkpatrick measurement framework, which is 4 levels. Level 1 is the experience. Level 2 is knowledge, skill gain. Level 3 is behavior change. And level 4 is performance change. And the things that we're talking about here is level 4. But it could be things like, it could be simple things like speed to customer, reduced costs, reduced cycle time, improved processes. So there's a whole host of things. If you want, Julie, when we're done with this, I have a whole deck on different measures that we've done for customers with some samples. I'm happy to send that to you if you just give us your email if we don't already have it. Reagan, you can tell me if we have Julie's email, and I can forward that to you, and then we can take it offline in even more detail.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would love that.
Here's the thing, Julie, the one thing I'll say to you is, as an internal role, don't take it on yourself, right? That's a question that you really should be putting back to the leadership team early on, and it's not too late to go back to them and say, well, you're the ones who want to do this redesign. Let's talk about why it is that you want to do it and what you expect to see. Be really careful about taking that on and just coming up with some measures yourself.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because I'm actually new to HR, but also new to being on a little COE like that. And so I do understand, like, we are looked at as the experts and the scarce resources and those that are replacing like the big consulting firms. But now I kind of know how to better position it based on what you guys just shared.
Yeah, it's a dangerous when you're internal. The requests typically come to you full responsibility, like just tell us what we need to do.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes the telling them what they need to do is actually, I need you in a room, I need you together, and I need you to answer these questions. But I'm not going to step in. And you can pop up other questions. Remember, anything you can tell, you can ask, but you want to be really careful about taking on responsibility for the business.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Especially when it comes to this large scale macro level change, like it's just too much for one person too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's another danger. It's just too much for one person to do it, and too much for one person to have all the answers.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yes. Thank you so much.
You're certainly welcome. Bernard will appreciate, as a socio-technical systems professional. One of the things we talk about is puzzle learning and collective genius, and based on the premise that no one person, even the leader, no matter how egocentric he or she is, and of course I'm not talking about anyone politically, but it goes for business leaders as well, is no one person has all the information about a particular part of the business. So that the more robust problem solving is getting different perspectives in the room and really looking at that question and other issues from a collective perspective, so that you have the representative work system in the room.
Oh, I just learned that concept from Chris Worley. I'm in grad school right now at the Pepperdine University. So
you're a Pepperdonian.
Yes. I mean, I'm graduating next year, but unfortunately this COVID-19 has like thrown off the international component of the program, but yes, getting through it.
So you won't be doing your international thing, but you can still do that virtually. All of our design work has shifted to be virtual now. So we're doing all of our design work virtually. And by the way, Dan Schmitz, who's on this call and is with the On the Mark team, is also a Pepperdonian.
Oh, that's so awesome. I've come to the right call in the right place. Thank you so much.
Hey, Julie.
Hey. Is that Dan?
It is. I'm with the Pi Prime cohort.
Oh, cool. Cool. I'm with the Psi Prime.
Yeah, let's connect offline.
Sure.
Great. All right, next question.
Yeah, so Bernard has a question about kind of the imagination that design work requires and how sometimes people are limited by their own experiences. So I know you just talked about collective genius and perspective, but do you have any other tactics or ideas for kind of expanding people's awareness when they're kind of locked into a particular view?
Well, absolutely. So Bernard, when we go into the concept design phase, once we have the requirements, parameters, and constraints established by the leadership team, and they're unwaveringly supportive and committed to those, which is a big deal. Once we go into concept design, it's the most creative aspect. And the tool that we primarily use is called rapid prototyping. But we also do a lot of education. We give them lots of reading And as a rapid prototype, they have to forget about people. So one of the things about prototyping is we focus on the core, the customer, what creates value for customers from the customer perspective. We focus on only the value creating work. And then we focus on bounding that work, which is the DNA for structure. And in rapid prototyping, we have them try on, and we typically iterate, can be anywhere from 3 iterations of prototyping to 7 to 8 iterations over the course of 3 or 4, sometimes 5 days, until they get the operating model correct. And it's a series of, at each iteration of prototyping in small groups, we identify features of the operating model that they want to build on, and we start creating a list of features that they really like. Now, here's the dynamic or the trap of prototyping that you have to stay away from. The first prototype iteration is most like today's organization. We call it, it's like gravity pulling you back down to earth, right? Trying to get out of the atmosphere. The gravity of a legacy construct or operating model is very difficult to get out of. But what we find is iterations 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, they start to really start to expand. We also will give them, we will also look for people who are most innovative and put them off in a corner by themselves and say, come up with something totally different, totally unexpected. That fits with your design criteria and your requirements and parameters. Gosh, it would be great. Irina, I'm wondering, Irina, if you could help me a little bit and pull up the supply chain prototyping example with the actual raw picture that Peter and I worked on with the red. It's just a lot of scribbles on the pages and you kind of can see the prototype. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I don't think I'm actually able to share my screen, but I think we can send it out after to the attendees.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyway, Bernard, Peter, would you add anything to that, or Thomas?
The thing I would add, and you touched on it to some extent, Mark, is so the danger with doing rapid prototyping, the danger at the concept design stage is having the wrong people in the room. So the wrong people in the room are, the senior leadership who've been in the organization for a long time, because they will find it really difficult to use Mark's phrase, to break away from the gravitational pull of the current design. So we are quite prescriptive at one level about ensuring that we have got a really good cross-section of people in the room, particularly the high potentials, potentially new graduate entrants, and also making sure there's a fair few, a good number of people in the room. So that's the only thing I would add. It is you're using collective genius, but you've got to make sure that you haven't haven't just got a lot of groupthink in the room. So seed whoever is in the room with mavericks, with what we would call free radicals, with high potentials, with graduates, people who are going to come in with different ideas and aren't afraid to voice them. That's all I would add. I don't know if Thomas or anybody else.
Oops, I think.
Thomas,
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I was muted. I was speaking, and then I realized I was muted. Yeah, and then that's I think the last point, and everything else has been greatly said, is really to create this. I mean, the word is psychology safety, to that people are really able to speak up with the leadership in the room. So trying to avoid to read what is the leadership, what is the senior leadership as the direction, prevents you from the solution, from building, creating great solutions. So that there's a requirement that everyone in the room is able to speak up and bringing up solutions here and speak on the same level. I think would be the only thing that I would add on this one.
The one thing, Bernard, we have a couple of rules during prototyping is we don't talk about people, jobs, or roles. And we have these, and it's all about bounding the work. So it's all about the work. So they have to go back to the work and talk about what work and how would they bound that work. So you heard me the other day on the Tuesday webinar for the ODN group. You heard me talk about the DNA for structure is the bounding of work. And why that's important is you don't get real change until you separate people from the work they do and the jobs they have. And as long as you're working in the vein of jobs and roles and people, you never get the change that you need to get. And so we find that as part of the really important, I wouldn't call it secret sauce, but similar to the secret sauce that really creates real change, is having people talk about the work that creates value and how would they organize that work differently so that it fits with their strategic intents and their requirements, business requirements. That creates a major shift for people. Other questions? And Reagan, I'm assuming you're monitoring the Q&A or the comments?
Yes, I am. We also have Gil on the line. Wanted to welcome Gil. Do you have any specific questions for us, or maybe you want to give us some info on where you're located in the world?
Hi, I'm in Toronto. I've met Mark before in Ann Arbor. I actually did have a question, which I don't know if that got answered because I joined late. With everybody being so, panicking these days, do you see an appetite for organizations to actually change or redesign how they do things as opposed to just deal with survival mode?
Yeah, let me start that, and then I'll go to Thomas and see if he has anything to add, and Peter. So here's what I would say is most of the design projects that come to us are not ones that businesses are in trouble, are ones where the business is either wanting to improve their position and or strive for some kind of growth. So the number of projects that we work on from a design perspective where the business is badly in trouble is probably 1 or 2 out of 10, and that it might even be less than that. Now, the reason I say that is because the projects that we currently have, even though people are seconded at home and there's lockdowns in all the different countries and we're all doing the best we can, all of the projects for the businesses that we have continue to flourish and go. So we're doing all of our design work now. We've shifted to virtual. Now what that requires, because we have such a robust methodology and tools and templates and steps, and we know what decisions need to be made, it makes it very simple for us to still go step by step. And because of the technology like Zoom, where we can do small group work and come back on, and we can do online discussions and voting and things of that nature and whiteboards, it really helps us quite a bit. So to answer your question simply is, right now, actually, we're sending out proposals because businesses want to look past this. And it's the businesses that, recognize that this is just a short-term thing that, yes, it'll have some longer-term impact in the future, in the ways of working. And in fact, it might, my guess is we'll have some positive impacts from this virus, including things like, well, we could do more work from home. But right now, our projects are still going full bore, and we're just moving from workshops and face-to-face to virtual. Thomas, would you add anything?
Again, yeah, I saw. The thing that I would add here is probably that, the business are right now looking on, this survival mode, but on a long run, I mean, this is a good time to really look on the, where do we want to move? Look on the strategic side, because there's a time after this virus. Whether it takes a few weeks or a few months, we don't know yet. Go back and have a look into this one, and revise the work, the operating model that you do. I think there's a couple of learnings, and Mark was already mentioning those. I mean, more virtual work is being done. People are working from home. I'm located in Germany. Working from home is always kind of a question. I don't know, Bernard, your name sounds German. Maybe you are German speaking. It's always this kind of discussion, can we do this one? Now we have to do it. We learn new ways of working, exercise them that have an impact on how we can define our operating models. So I believe it's a perfect time to actually take this time, have a look on my operating model, and do some design thinking here. Peter?
Yeah, I think the thing I like the word you used, Gil, about panic. Organizations always want to panic, and my interpretation of that often is, oh my God, we're under cost pressure. We need to take people out, or we need to move people around, or we need to restructure people. One of the things we will always say to our customers, and we'll say over and over again, is to design for the ideal. And then work out how you're going to get there. So if people only want to design for next week, then they're not doing redesign. They're just doing what you would describe, what I'm interpreting you're describing as panicking. The example I would give, I was several years ago now, I was HR director in the mail business in the UK. And we were in big trouble. We were in seriously big trouble. We were losing £1 million a day without any effort whatsoever. The immediate reaction to that could well have been, oh my God, we need to strip some cost out to stop hemorrhaging cash. Fortunately, the leadership team, with a bit of guidance, put some effort into thinking what the ideal design for the company would be in the future. And we actually did a design for the business 10 years out. But then said the first step we've got to make along the way is to take some cost out. But what we were able to do and what we were able to communicate in the organization then was, look, we have to take cost out, but taking cost out is one step on a journey to here. And we were able to describe the future. Now, not everybody likes that future, and that's a different story, but we were able to describe the future, but also describe why we were taking some immediate first steps, which were a bit about cost cutting, but we did it as part of a journey to an end point and to an ideal state for the organization. So I think the onus is on us as change agents, whether we're internal or external, to help the organization think through where they really want to take the organization and where their immediate panic response might fit within that journey. And I'm not saying that it isn't often sometimes the case that cost has to be taken out, but just ripping cost out without having a reason other than we've got to rip cost out tends not to go down well with the survivors in the organization. If you're able to say, here is the ideal design that we're aiming for, and our first step, unfortunately, is to have to take some cost out, you are at least able to take people with you on the journey. Sorry, that was a long, short interrupt, but I hope it helped.
Gil, was that helpful?
Yes, it was. And I enjoyed hearing that, you have gone online, right? And so I do Agile enablement, right? And I've also moved online, but what I'm seeing and what so many of my peers in the Agile community are saying is that there is no appetite to talk to consultants. There's no appetite to spend money on anything that is discretionary. And they're not thinking big design. And the interesting thing is that while that happens, a lot of organizations are actually forced into agility. They are putting people first, right? And they are about delivering value and as much as they can, responding to change over following a plan. right? But this is a survival tactic that they kind of were forced into, and a lot of what your company deals with, like you guys just said, is strategic and it's for the long term. But you know, it's you know, when companies are hemorrhaging so fast now, I'm seeing, you know, huge difficulty in helping anybody think about.
Well, yeah, I would say that this would not be a good time to make a sale. So the good, I guess the good news for us is all of these projects were running before, they're already hugely invested, and they're looking past the next 3 months, 6 months. So they're thinking beyond that. I don't think it'd be easy to do any kind of sale. You know, the one thing I will say to you, Gil, also is this is not a hit on the Agile community, as in terms of you know, Agile is as I'll channel Peter here, is we've done a series of blog articles. Peter has authored those for us on Agile is not the same as Agile. And an Agile design is not the same as the Agile way of working, like in the software industry. And you know, that was never intended to be an entire operating model. It has a place, it has its place. And I think part of in the Agile community, the Agile way of working community, as opposed to Agile designing an Agile organization, which for me are not the same things. It's a little bit like they're zealots, and I know one thing, and I wouldn't want to, at this point in time, I think it's too much for people to, when they're trying to do business continuation and trying to figure out what is going to be the demand, to go in and sell something like that big. I don't think it's the right time.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in the zealot camp, right? You have my, I don't remember if you've seen that, but yeah, the zealots are definitely not going to get much work done this time. But it's just a matter of focusing now.
But I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right about this time working from home really lends itself to how can we be more agile in the way we work, and it's forcing companies to figure that out. And it is a great opportunity to your point, which I think is spot on.
Yeah, I mean, just yesterday I heard from someone at one of the Canadian banks, so I'm in Toronto, where, you know, they had to ramp up for getting people working from home. Something that would have taken 4 months actually took less than a week. And,
well, it's exactly right. When you're forced to do something, you get on and do it.
and then the next obvious question is, why doesn't it take a week for normal practice? Why does it have to take 4 months?
Well, we know the answer to that. We know the answer to that, Bernard. It's us as humans. It's control. It's you know, it's insuredness. It's legacy. I know. But you know, there's no secret here. And the thing, this is no different in design work. You know, people ask a lot of questions, which is how do you ensure leaders get on the same page? Look, if we in our methodology and in our solution, we have what's called a monopoly step, which is a foundation phase. And that phase, if you remember from playing Monopoly, maybe you're playing them now, pulled out your Monopoly boards again, since we're all seconded at home. But you know, do not pass go, do not collect $200 or whatever your currency is, 200 sterling or whatever. The point being here is that the foundation phase, before we come out of that, we don't move forward into any design work unless leaders are completely horizontally aligned, meaning there can't be any cracks in the armor. And sometimes I can tell you that work takes sequestering leaders in a room and having the right dialogue, testing all of their assumptions, and what have you. And that is difficult work, and that's got nothing to do with the design choices as much as it has to do with human beings and control and leadership and ego and how many people report to me. And we have seen some, there's not much we haven't seen when it comes to those conversations, from chairs being thrown out to the room or across the room, and other histrionics and drama. So I think, why does that happen? I think it's easily explained through the psychology and human systems. Let's take a next question. Anyone else? You're welcome, Gil. Thank you. And it's good to hear your voice again. I hope you and I hope everybody on this call, their family and themselves are well and safe. Somebody else?
There's someone joining in on the phone, it looks like from the Minnesota area. I'm not sure who that is exactly. If you want to introduce yourself or if you have a specific question.
I thought it was Usely, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And Bernard also just had another question asking, how many of us are typically on site for workshops and what roles do we take?
Bernard, we typically don't do any on-site workshops unless in 3, and we might go as low as 2s for smaller functional redesigns, but typically 3. And the roles we have are support consultant, and senior consultant, and that is our standard team. And we can have as many as 5, 7, 8, 10 team members, depending on the scope and the unit of service. So for example, when we did the redesign of Fitbit in San Francisco, they were under tremendous pressure, and they were one of those organizations that needed to move in quickly, and the street was watching them, and they had made a commitment to the financial community about what they were going to achieve, and we had all hands on deck. We must have had, Peter was leading that along with a support consultant who we also have co-lead project, and we had anywhere between 5 to 8 of us on site, but we always had a team of at least 3 there, the 3 core, and then we'd bring other people in and out. But our basic number is 2 or 3. Irina, do you want to add anything to that as a senior support consultant?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I think that you hit it pretty well. We each have our respective roles that we play in the workshop, and I think we work really well cohesively as a team. Just knowing, especially working with Mark and the team for now 3 years, we kind of fall into a pattern of, okay, we know we're doing this now, and then who's doing what. So it's important to have these role distinctions just because we do different things. I'm mainly in charge of documentation, making sure that the rooms are set up. The consultant is also supporting in many different ways. The senior consultant is key to facilitation and really making sure that the content is successful. So those roles are very important within our organization, and I think there's similar across other organizations, but it's just very good to know the role distinctions.
And one of my, I don't think anyone can do design work by themselves. I don't think it's such a major solution. And Julie, I was actually thinking of you as an internal, and maybe this speaks to you, maybe it doesn't, but you can't be doing design work all day long with the customer and then at 8 o'clock or midnight doing all the documentation. By the way, what about the HR database and how do you track all the roles that are impacted and work that changes? And so, for us, teaching internal COEs on how to stand up a proper org design practice and making sure that you're set up to be successful for internals or externals, particularly internals, is very important, because there's just no way, no matter how much experience the seniors on this call have, that you can actually do it properly.
Yeah.
Especially unless you're going beyond strategic kind of thinking. Go ahead, Julie, let me be quiet.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I did some informal benchmarking just to see what like Google was doing and General Mills and some other companies like J&J, Johnson & Johnson. And I'm finding that they don't really have an org design COE. It's more of like an embedded skill set that sits in the business. And sometimes it falls into the hands of an HRBP, and other times change management, and other times it falls into the PMO office or transformation office. So I'd be interested to hear, like, what trends are you seeing? Is it that you are seeing more org design COE spin up, or is this now an expected skill set that is, you know,
Boy,
on the leaders themselves running the businesses?
if you ever want to talk to what I would consider more mature and proper internal org design practices, reach out to us after this call, because we can put you in touch with where we think there are better ones. And
Wow.
I will tell you, most internal COEs are, I want to pick my words carefully here, immature in terms of their development. So number one is they're making up their methodology, their solution as they go, so they don't have common tools and practices. They typically deal with just structure, which is typically how we're going to organize people, jobs, and roles, and it's not really what I consider proper design work. And so, I think there's not a whole lot of practices from internal practices that I would hold up as a model, but one of them being a customer of ours, a woman named Jilly, who works with a company called Victrex, and again, we can put you directly in touch with her. Jilly has set up a team internally, and they have a pretty robust, very robust methodology tools, and they're doing both Jilly as the CHRO. She is one of the few CHROs that really understands design work, and because of that, her team, she really gets it. And the COE is a center of excellence, Bernard, in the spirit of Dave Ulrich's model for HR. A center of excellence is a small group of practitioners internal who get farmed out to do design work. I was just answering one of Bernard's questions. Anyway, Julie, we can point you in directions where people, where there's some good internal practices that you can learn from. There's also, one of the ethical dilemmas of being an internal practitioner is there's a lot of responsibility on you to be able to deliver and just answer the questions that a business comes to you to answer. And the problem is that many times answering those questions requires much different work behind the scenes. And one of the roles, we talk about it and we teach it and we try to embed it internally, is you have to be a free radical and go above your boss's boss, and you need to be able to go wherever you need to go. And what we typically say is follow the work in internal design work. If those things aren't set up properly, then you're pretty much flailing in the wind, if you will, in terms of doing design work. So I think there's a whole set of setup activities. There's a role that the CHRO has to play and come to grips with. They need to be unconditionally supportive of you, and you need to be able to go wherever you need to go in the organization. Let me be quiet there and see if Peter's been both an internal practitioner and has led an org design practice from an HR perspective, and has worked as standing him up. So Peter, go ahead.
Probably not a lot to add, or a lot to add, but I'll take the shorter version. I think the thing I learned when I had, so as an HR director, I had a OD COE and I had HR business partners. The important lesson I learned was being really clear on what the role of the COE is and what the role of the business partner is, and ultimately what the role of the line leader is of the part of the organization that wants to organize. Because if you get too tangled up in that, you finish it with business partners who think they know more than the COE and therefore don't call them in. Or you finish it with COEs who think they know more than the business partners and start treading on the business partners' toes and going over their heads or around them and talking to their line leader and then annoying the business partner. So you've got to get the relationship between the COE, the business partner, and the line leader clear and fairly well contracted, so that you don't finish up with conflict, being very blunt about it, with internal political conflict. And it was an important lesson I learned, because I got that slightly wrong the first time I set up an internal OD COE. You just got to be clear. We talked about it very early on in a different context, but you're really clear where the power lies and what the work boundaries are between the COE, the business partner, and the line leader. And I could go on forever about that. Well, not forever, but for a long time about that, because I've got some of the scars, but also some of the joy of getting it right. So I'm very happy to have that conversation offline.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I think I'm very talented right now at driving that conflict, and I think that's my core issue right now is I don't have the right people.
Here's the thing: it's not your core issue, Julie. It's the setup of the HR model, and it is the downside of the all work 3-box model, which we don't have enough time for me to be able to talk to all of its not so great trade-offs. But Peter just described the classic dilemma and power struggle, and the issue that you have to work as lateral thinking. The first piece of work you have to do with setting up an internal org design practice is getting clear on how org design services are going to be identified or diagnosed all the way through delivery, and how that's going to work across your HR organization. And that's your first piece of design work before you start stumbling over each other trying to work with customers. You got to solve those power struggles and really do it properly. And it has to be done exactly like you would do it for customers, starting with what do our internal customers expect from us. And you need to cut through the power struggles like business partners saying, oh, we're more important, and everybody like, no, that's ours, we own the customer, and all that nonsense.
Right.
And I use nonsense deliberately. We're about out of time, am I right, Reagan?
Yeah, we are. Bernard actually had 2 or 3 more questions, so I don't know if you want to take them or take them offline.
Yeah, no, let's do that just a couple minutes. The first is we partner with IT. It's not just IT folks, finance folks all the time, Bernard. In our rigorous solution methodology, we have built-in approval points and decision gates before moving forward. And at each gate, we ask the question, who are the stakeholders that need to be in this room? So typically we might not start out with IT in the room, but it's not uncommon for us to bring in IT pretty early on, or someone from finance, or someone from another part of the business who is affected significantly by the redesign. Peter, Thomas, would you add anything to that, or Peter?
It's interesting, Bernard, you talk about different language and different methodology. Certainly with IT folk, I've found it quite important to have those language and methodology conversations offline rather than as part of the design work, and be quite clear, I think, that if you're facilitating and leading and driving the design work, then you try and work within your own language and your own methodology. However, there are times when you do have to merge the two, is probably the best way I would describe it. So I wouldn't die in a ditch over language and methodology. But nor would I change any phases or any steps in the process. So I'm thinking of a project that Mark and I did a couple of years ago working with the IT folk in a large telecoms organization, and they had a methodology that was very similar to ours, but the language they used for each phase was slightly different. And at the end of the day, it wasn't something for us to die in a ditch over, because we could see that the methodology was the same. So I think you've got to work with your customers' language and methodology, recognizing that you don't want to compromise your own methodology, but nor do you want to alienate them. So it's an offline conversation before you get into the detail of the work itself, for me. Don't know if
All right, so I'm gonna, Thomas, anything to add for Bernard's questions?
No, that was, I think there was a point made already. It's about using the language of the people that you work with and making and creating the alignment. Thanks.
All right. Julie, just to confirm, if you get your email to Reagan or to us, I'll send you that deck on the potential measures that we have, just with some examples. And if you want to talk with us afterwards about connecting with other internal OD practices, just reach out to us and let us know. We can do the cyber intros.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you.
And Reagan, I'm going to pass this back to you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks everyone so much for joining. This was really productive and generated great conversation. So hopefully it was interesting for everyone, even when it wasn't your question. And of course, we're here and available to connect. So if anyone has other questions, I've been in touch with everyone. You can email me and we'll get you the information you need, or we can set up another call separately. So just keep us posted, and we hope everyone stays safe and healthy.
Reagan, when do we have our next AMA?
It will be in April. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but
This is a monthly thing we do then.
Yes.
Great. All right. Our mystery guest from Minnesota, the 651 number. Everyone, Julie, Bernard, what a pleasure, and on the Mark team. It's good to have everyone here. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Priya.
Thanks, guys.